welcome back to the HubScale podcast, the podcast dedicated to the cybersecurity community. This week we have none other than Jason Cenamor. Jason is the head of community for Merlin Ventures, and he's also the founder of the CISO Society. Jason, great to have you on.
The pleasure is all mine. Thank you very much for having me.
And Jason, for the listeners who don't know who Jason Cenamor is, would you like to give a little bit of a background into your experience and how you got to where you are today?
Yeah, for sure. So basically a lot of my experience background in the event space. So as you know, viewers, listeners will be able to hear, I'm not originally from the US. I moved over here in 2012. Started working for an event organization that was running conferences, summits, dinners, etc. in the technology space, which is where I started kind of cutting my teeth in this whole, cybersecurity and emerging technology world. Did that for a while, had my own event company for a short period of time, merged that with another event organization. And then in 2021, decided just to step away from that, really focus on building a community. I kind of identified that there was more of a need to bring people together in a little bit more of an informal, non-solicited type of environment so they could collaborate with one another, share ideas, et cetera, et cetera. So started the CISO Society back in September 2021. Through that, obviously got introduced to a number of individuals across various walks of life, including the VC world, which is where I started talking with the Merlin Ventures crew, and then ended up joining their team in September of last year as their director of community, basically leading the expansion of their network in the US and also the management of their advisory council.
Nice. And I guess for the listeners as well, obviously there's so many exciting VCs in the security world, but what is it about Merlin that attracted you, and also what is it that makes Merlin so special?
Great question. Glad you asked it. So yeah, the VC world is very saturated, and I've had the pleasure and fortune of speaking to a number of different VCs, all of which are extremely valuable in their own right. What drew me to Merlin, were a number of things. First and foremost, the team. The team are an absolute pleasure to work with. Very diligent, great personalities. They fit my kind of personality, it's myself as well, in the way I like to kind of conduct business. So there was just a natural fit for us all there. Secondly, it's the way they're operating as a VC. So the thing that really struck me about Merlin and what they do, and especially how they feed their community, a lot of our focus is, it's not just about how can we serve Merlin? How can we serve our portfolio? It's about how can we serve executives based here in the US and beyond by giving them a deeper understanding of and exposure to the entire Israeli startup ecosystem. Merlin Ventures is a VC firm, US-based, that invests in, for the most part, early stage Israeli cybersecurity companies. And the way in which they go into a lot of detail, analyzing all these different organizations that are coming out of Israel, providing that kind of in-depth analysis and feedback to our community, and really helping just executives get connected with the companies they're interested in, and helping those early stage companies get connected with the right people over here in the US. It just struck me because a lot of VCs can be quite self-serving, naturally and understandably. But the way Merlin approached it was very much in an agnostic fashion. And that, to me, kind of blended with the way in which I like to operate, even with the CISO Society prior to joining Merlin. So from that, it was really a no-brainer. Second to that, they're making great investments. The portfolio is extremely strong, incredible founders, incredible products. Really, doing a lot of amazing things over here with organizations in the US and beyond as well. And so you kind of put all those together, and it just created the perfect environment, really.
Super exciting. How many vendors are currently on the Merlin portfolio, just out of interest?
So as of now, we have 13 portfolio companies, as one recently exited. Of those 13, 10 are out of Israel, 2 are in the US, but founded by Israelis, and one of them is up in Canada.
And I remember when we first met, it was a couple of months ago back at the Israel Cyber Week. You said that Tel Aviv was your favorite city.
Favorite city, yeah. Each time I go there, I kind of fall in love with it just a little bit more. You take the professional side and you go and you're exposed to just an incredible level of entrepreneurship, work ethic, intelligence, right? Just the folks there that you get to interact with are amazing, absolutely amazing. And then you put that against the backdrop of this incredible city, beautiful on the beach, amazing food, really, really friendly, amazing atmosphere, everything about it. You know, every time I go, meet new people, cement relationships with existing friends. And it's always a worthwhile trip. I can't recommend it enough to anyone who's not been for Cybertech or Cyber Week or just gone in general, just to kind of engage on their own kind of schedule. I can't recommend it enough. It really is one of the most valuable experiences I've had and continue to have.
Amazing. And yeah, one of the reasons why we wanted to bring you onto the podcast is just the real kind of community aspect. I know community is becoming a little bit more of a buzzword in the not just the security world, but I think in the software world in general. And I'm sure there's many listeners out there who are super interested in, I guess, what it takes to build a successful community and how to even start. Be interested to hear from your perspective, what is it that I guess it makes a successful community?
So first, to pick up on what you said, yes, it is the buzzword. It's what everyone's saying. It's funny because people, organizations, whatever, who have been conducting business or, you know, interacting with customers, prospects and beyond for a long time, they're still doing exactly the same thing. They just added this word community in front of it now because it seems like something kind of more important. And it's funny to kind of see that happen. But community is extremely valuable, right? And communities exist in different forms. I think when it comes to building a successful community, there are a lot of different elements to this. And I've been learning as I go, right? I definitely wasn't a community professional when I started the CISO Society. But the experience that I've had throughout, it just kind of teaches you ways in which you need to continuously feed value to your community, keep it evolving and keep it consistent. The first and most important thing to building a successful community is identifying what is the need of that community. What is the purpose, right? Everyone wants to do it. It's like anything. When there's a buzzword going around, everyone kind of wants to attach themselves to it, right? It could be said in the software world right now, AI, generative AI. Everyone's like, okay, how do I include this in my company description? Because that's what everyone's looking for example. And similarly with community, right? Like you've got to really define what is the purpose, what is the clear value proposition to the individuals that you want to bring into this community, to give them a reason to dedicate their time to engaging in that community and to extract value from that community. That's number one. And I see a lot of communities failing in the early stages purely because they haven't been able to find that purpose, right? So if I look at Merlin, the community that we manage in partnership with the Israeli embassy is the Israeli Startup Advisory Network, okay? ISAN for short. The purpose of ISAN when it was created was, how do we help US-based security executives, whether they be chief information security officers or, you know, directors, VPs of security in their respective organizations, the companies and the individuals looking to adopt these technologies to improve their security posture, or whether it be an association that's trying to bring some of these companies in so they can educate the marketplace. It could be a value-added reseller, MSSPs. It could be, you know, frameworks, even CEOs of vendors trying to create channel partnerships, right? What are we trying to do for them? And the idea was how basically we want to give them a deeper understanding of the entire Israeli startup ecosystem. There's a lot of interest in Israel for obvious reasons. How do we help them navigate, separate the signal from the noise? That is it. Right? When I did the CISO Society, it was purely how do I create a place where CISOs can come together, collaborate, share information with one another on all the things that are important to a CISO in their role, right? You've got to start there. If you're thinking about what you want to get out of it as the starting point, you're going to fail, right? What you get out of it should come as a natural result of what you're trying to do for your community. And then you can start identifying ways in which it can, you know, provide benefits to you as well.
Yeah, it's so true, isn't it? I think that's the same in any walk of sales or anything at all, where the main focus should always be delivering the best level of service to the customers or to the POCs as possible. And then everything else just is a net result off the back of the work that you've been doing. So, really interesting. And just out of interest, sorry, go on.
No, I was going to say, you know, this is the challenge that a lot of people see. Like, so we'll get on to kind of like what makes a successful community, etc. But I see a lot of vendors trying to build communities, but they see it as a prospect pool for sales. Then it's going to, if you succeed, you're going to have a very long and difficult journey getting there, doing that. When you're creating a community, you've always got to think about an equal measure of give and take for the members. And, in my personal opinion, actually, 60-70% of what you do in that community needs to serve the community members, needs to be just for them, right? And then that extra 30% can be value to you. But you can only ask for that 30% once you've given them 70. Do you see what I mean? And you've got to always kind of be shown to be demonstrating value for them, because then they're going to be able to develop trust with you. They're going to develop more of an affiliation to your group, and they're going to be more open to, responding to a request here and there when you ask for it, whether it be coming to a small event or chatting with, a founder of a new startup or providing feedback on the marketplace, whatever it may be. If you're giving them value for their time, they will give you time back and give you value back in return.
Super interesting. And what would you say the biggest challenges of building a successful community?
There's a number of challenges, right? I think number one is consistency. In order to develop a successful community, you've got to be consistent with your actions and activities. And you've also got to follow through your promises. There's no point saying, we're going to do this and we're going to do this, and then you never do it, right? And I've fallen foul of doing that myself sometimes, right? You're there to please. And then workload becomes too much or whatever, and you realize you kind of dropped the ball on something and you haven't necessarily followed through with something that you were committed to doing. Consistency is key. It's like with anything. If you're creating content, right? Like you can't just create a podcast once and then do another one in 3 months and do another one 4 months later. If you want people to keep coming back, you've got to be consistent with publishing that content. So that's challenge number one. It's hard, but you've really got to be diligent with the consistency. The second challenge, really, and it's almost the biggest challenge, but I put it below consistency because, it comes in different formats, but it's really harnessing the engagement. So a lot of groups, individuals, they try and start communities, within 3 months, they're like, hey, my members aren't engaging with one another. And it's hard to get that going because right now, every single week you're getting an email from someone or a LinkedIn message saying, hey, join my community, join my Slack group, whatever it may be. 90% of those Slack groups, there's no action. No one's posting, no one's commenting. It's just there. And then if people don't see other people posting and commenting, then they're not going to post and comment, right? It's like if you're in a room with someone, it's silent, and you start whispering to the person next to you. Now all of a sudden someone else starts whispering. Then all of a sudden people are talking over each other. Now there's noise, right? That's what you've got to try and create, that ripple effect in a community. So I remember in my earlier stages when I was developing it, and really my event experience kind of played, towards this, but I would literally grab people by like the virtual neck and get them to talk with one another. So when I first started the CISO Society, I had about 10 to 15 members kind of join from day one. And as new members started joining, I would reach out to those kind of original members and say, I need you to post something today in our Slack group. And they would say, what? And I would say, whatever you want. Surely there's something, a question you have that you just would love to get the perspective of other CISOs on, for example. Okay, cool. So they go and post. And then I go and grab another person and say, right, you need to now respond to Elliot's post. You need to respond now. But I don't have an answer for them. It doesn't matter. They need to be seen to be heard, right? So just acknowledge the fact that you've seen their post. And then you might not have anything valuable to provide, but you're acknowledging it. And then someone else will go, well, I can help with that. And then all of a sudden, other people feel comfortable. Hey, okay, well, if that person posted and that person responded, maybe I'll post a question and then somebody else will respond. So you've got to be really hands-on in the early stages. It's not just going to happen overnight. Once your community reaches a certain level of maturity, then that engagement becomes natural. So I take, what we do with Merlin and ISAN. We have these monthly calls for our community where we essentially kind of dissect 4 different startups. We present them to our members. We go into a lot of detail, following some due diligence we've done on them. How much have they raised? What's their founding team like? What's the track record of the founding team? Who are their competitors? Who are their lead investors? What are the strengths? What are the weaknesses of the product, et cetera, et cetera. And then we open it up for the group to discuss, right? Again, in the earlier stages of those ISAM meetings, the engagement wasn't as high. But over time, you start to learn what are the triggers, what are the questions that get people talking, how can we encourage more people posting, and then the next kind of like natural step is that, okay, well, how can we take that into Slack? Because the beauty of a community is the ability to engage year round. You don't need to wait for the Zoom meeting, right? You can get people sharing with one another when they have a genuine need and desire to do so. And so the next natural step of that is how do we take what happens in those meetings and put that into a more real-time daily engagement in our group, so that by the time we get to the next meeting, right, there's even more engagement, and then there's even more engagement. And that's really the key.
No, super interesting. And I think one of the big tips, I guess, for an individual looking to set up a community, or a business looking to set up a community, is definitely that consistency piece. But what would you say, just out of interest, would be your top tip for an individual or for a group looking to set up a community in 2023?
I think my top tip, it would probably be going back to my point about don't do it because you see an opportunity to generate a ton of money at the end of it or anything like that. Like, do it for a reason that truly benefits the individuals that you are looking to invite into your community and expecting to engage in your community. Like, that's the top tip. Reverse engineer the process. Put yourself in their shoes first. What do you think they want, right? And just like any vendor would, right? If there's a cybersecurity startup, they're going to speak to 50 to 100 CISOs. They're going to do a bunch of research, right? Okay, we're operating in the data security space. What are the existing challenges you've experienced so far? Where do you see existing products not kind of like, solving the challenges that you have, et cetera, et cetera? You've got to do the same thing. You've got to do a ton of research. You've got to identify what are the key pain points that people experience, the value they're looking for that they're not getting elsewhere, and then start kind of creating that blueprint for success. The second tip is expect for your original plan to evolve time and time and time again, right? What your community looks like today, it's not going to look that way in a year's time. There's going to be new people, new voices. There's going to be new initiatives you want to run. So you can't be rigid. You have to be fluid. And what I always say to people when they ask about, the success of, communities that I manage, it's really been based on letting the members kind of walk me down their path. So instead of me going, I need you to come and do this and walk down this path with me because that's what's going to benefit me, you need to just take a back seat and say, right, okay, you grab my arm, you lead me where you want to go. And every now and then I'll say, maybe we don't take that route and maybe we go this route, right? And I go, okay, cool. And that's really important. Just let the group, it's almost like having a big customer advisory board. Customer advisory board is any vendor's most valuable asset, in my personal opinion. And your community is essentially one large customer advisory board. Listen to what they're saying, pay attention to what they're looking for, and then execute, give it to them. And if you follow those simple steps, you'll find your community starts thriving a lot quicker. And you'll kind of avoid that kind of first year slump that I see a lot of communities go through.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. I think that brings me on to one of the final questions that I'll ask around, specifically around the community. But where do you think this community world is going to evolve to over the next, say, 3 to 5 years?
Okay, I do have an opinion on this, and a lot of folks have disagreed with me. Some do, some agree with me. So I think a true community, right? The members of that community should have some say and influence in the direction of the community. Okay. So it shouldn't be, for want of a better word, a dictatorship. It shouldn't be one person creating all the ideas and creating all the rules, and more importantly, seeing all the benefit. Right. And a good example of this is actually communities that have developed in things like the cryptocurrency world, where there's this things called DAOs, DAOs, like a decentralized autonomous something. I can't remember what the O stands for, right? But ultimately, what happens there is all the members of the said community, they have some sort of shares or some sort of ownership in the community itself. So anything that happens that benefits the community, right, it benefits everyone, and everybody gets a reward for that. And I actually see that as a natural progression. So instead of a single entity or an individual managing the group and designing what activities they do, what programs are run, initiatives, and how it evolves, the community itself becomes almost this kind of democratized group where they'll vote on certain initiatives and they'll vote on where they think the community should be going. And for the time they give to that community to provide value for everyone and the person who manages it, they get some form of reward. That's where I kind of see it going, because ultimately, anyone who's part of a community, they're giving up their time to engage in it. And there's a return on that time, right? The investment on that time is the value they receive from the input they get from others, the resources, the content, the new connections, whatever it may be. But I think, the way it's starting to evolve is people are going to start being a little bit more collaborative with one another. The communities that thrive the most are going to be the ones where every single person in that group has some sort of voting power, or even to the point where, and again, cryptocurrency, it's we don't know where things are heading there, but maybe there's some sort of token that the communities can introduce where the members of said community receive a token. And if that community monetizes, the value of that token increases. So as a member of that community now, you're kind of getting rewarded for helping it grow, right? And for your time and engagement. And that's potentially where I see it going.
I guess the most exciting thing about it is no one knows as well. The level of ambiguity is not just in the community world, but in I guess software and security in general. But yeah, super interesting.
No one knows, right? Think about the power of a collective group of chief information security officers, right? Now, what is to stop a community of chief information security officers creating new frameworks for the industry as a community? Right? Creating policies, that happens already. Creating new products. Why wouldn't a group of CISOs decide, this is a challenge we're all experiencing. How do we as a collective group create a new product for the industry, make an open source format where it's just going to benefit everyone else? Like, that is pretty powerful. And, you're starting to see these things happen independently anyway. And I can start seeing where these kind of independent groups will begin playing a major role in the development of new products, new frameworks, new policies, whatever it may be, even running their own events for gatherings and stuff. Well, that's kind of, it's quite exciting. It is quite exciting. But to your point, no one really knows where it's going to go. All I can see is that power community just growing, right? Like, word of mouth has always been the most effective marketing tool. Well, inside any community, if they're talking about vendors they don't like, vendors they do like, vendors they recommend, vendors they don't recommend, how do you present to the board? How do you do this? It's just going to become more and more influential, to the point where communities could even have some form of influence and control over the success of a vendor. Because as soon as people start talking negatively about them inside those groups, it's going to be very difficult for that vendor to break through that negativity and start showing that they can provide value in different areas.
Yeah, no, super interesting. I know we've got Black Hat coming up in the next couple of weeks, which brings me on nicely to, I guess, the second topic of the conversation today, all around events, sponsoring events and hosting events. You were recently at the Merlin Safari. Super interesting stuff. How was that, first of all?
Really cool. So yeah, events, such an important component of development of any community, right? Yeah, it's great that you can speak in Slack or Signal or Discord or WhatsApp, whatever platform people are using, but bringing your community together for in-person interaction, nothing beats it. Merlin Safari was amazing. It was amazing. So throughout the course of this year, Merlin's been running some really great events, right? We either attach ourselves to a large conference, whether it be Cybertech or Cyber Week in Israel or RSA or Black Hat coming up, where we'll run, cocktail receptions, give folks within our existing community the ability to come, cement their existing relationships, invite new people to come along and learn a little bit more about what we're doing by talking to other members in the group. So important, so valuable. Networking is, in my opinion, the most valuable element that any event can provide, right? Networking first, content second, in my personal opinion. What we did with Merlin Safari was really kind of play to that. So the idea was about, okay, we've got an audience here of CISOs and we've got an audience of CEOs, the founders of the startups. Now, what are the common themes that bind those two profiles together. So a typical event, right? What you normally have, especially in the security world, is you'll have a bunch of people getting up on stage and talking about anything from endpoint security or ransomware or cyber insurance or whatever it may be, right? You get these individual thought leader perspectives. Great. But some of that content is going to alienate people. Like if you're the CEO of a vendor that provides an application security solution, do you really care about, endpoint security, or do you really care about like ransomware and stuff like that? Yes, of course, it's always in your mind, but is that really important to you? So what we were thinking about is what is the content that kind of binds those two groups together? And what we landed on was, well, it's how do you develop deeper relationships? How do you create partnerships between CISO and CEO so you can both thrive in the ecosystem and help each other instead of just having this kind of transactional relationships that exist where I'm trying to sell you something and you need to buy something. So from that, we developed content that really played towards that, right? Like how do CISOs find advisory positions? What do CEOs look for from their advisors? How do startups promote their products and sell their products against already established vendors, right? You're a small company, you're going against these big behemoths. How do you do that? How do you get the attention? How do you effectively sell to these buyers? How do CISOs avoid conflicts of interest if they are advisors? These are some of the things that we wanted to tackle, okay? And so from that perspective, it was awesome. But then again, thinking about that theme of relationships, okay, well, we need to give people enough time to build relationships. So my biggest gripe with events is there's never enough time for networking. Never. They try and cram too much content into the agenda. And most of the time that content is led by the vendors, okay? Because they've purchased a slot on that agenda. That's the sponsorship model. Okay, cool. But people want to network. They want to meet. So what we thought about was, well, let's create that environment. So we took them off site for an entire day where they did fly fishing, hiking. Even the sessions on our agenda were all lent towards like collaborative discussions, round tables, panel discussions, build relationships, so network whilst you're educating, right? And that kind of created this awesome environment for Safari to really find. It was an amazing experience, really, really great. We're getting some great feedback from folks as well, so really good starting points. The first one that we've run, so that was really cool. Second part of your question there about sponsorship. Sponsors come in different forms, right? Ultimately, what you're going to look at when it comes to sponsorship is, okay, well, who is the audience of the event? And what are the types of company profiles that want to gain brand exposure and access to that audience? Okay, so the typical types of events that exist in this world are the audience are going to be the security practitioners, right? And the vendors are going to be the sponsors. And, a vendor is going to look for the ability to speak on the agenda, a lot of the time try and secure meetings with some of the attendees on site. They're going to want the lead list, the attendee list afterwards, so they can follow up, all that kind of stuff. So those are the three kind of typical like thought leadership, branding exposure, and lead generation, right? That's what a sponsor looks for. I feel the event industry is a little bit broken right now, quite honestly, because a lot of event companies exist. A very small percentage of them do a good job. A very large percentage of them just strike it lucky every now and then by just having like the right kind of like perfect storm mixed together. But for the most part, their revenue model of invite someone to come for free and then have vendors essentially pay for that experience and then generate profit, what it means is your focus as an event organizer is already going to be on pleasing the vendor. As a result of that, you run the risk of displeasing your attendees. Okay. So there's always got to be this like fine line that you've got to strike that balance, because once you start catering towards one demographic more than the other, you're going to lose the other demographic. So if you start catering too much towards the vendors, the CISO is just going to say, I'm not going to go to that event anymore. If you cater too much towards the CISOs, the vendors are going to say, this doesn't provide me the return on investment that, for what you're charging. So you got to think about what type of sponsorship package, what type of deliverables as part of that sponsorship really provide that return on investment, right? That's number one. And then you got to look at those sponsor profiles. So again, if I look at something like Merlin Safari, our sponsors, Davis Polk and Wardwell, CyberArk Ventures. Well, Davis Polk are a law firm, right? They want to be able to educate founders of, cybersecurity vendors on the benefits of having a solid legal partner, right? Especially as they start growing and especially if they have ambitions of going public. You need a very solid legal partner. So Davis Polk are really there just to try and kind of make sure that people are aware of them and make sure that they have the ability to engage with some of these founders in the early stages. So when it comes to 2-3 years later and they start thinking about their exit strategy, they already know who Davis Polk are, right?
Mm.
CyberArk Ventures are there because they want to help support their portfolio companies. They want to be able to get them in front of amazing security executives that can give them go-to-market, product market fit advice. Some folks who might want to create design partnerships, some people who might even want to adopt the technology full-time. They want to do that, want to build that exposure, as well as potentially expose their brand to the wider CISO community as well, where they might be able to then pull new advisors into their ecosystem, right? So it's a different type of sponsorship profile. And that's the key. You've got to, again, just look at your audience and say, all right, well, based on this audience, what are the type of organizations that would be interested in engaging with that audience, right? And then you've got to think about what can we provide from a deliverable standpoint to those sponsors, which isn't going to compromise the experience of the audience. And then finally, what is that price point? What is that price point? You know, a lot of the event companies out there, they're for-profit event companies. So their price point is going to be covering their bases and making a profit. Okay. Some other event companies, they'll literally just generate enough revenue so it covers the cost of the event. Right? Because it's not about making money. So this is us, Merlin's Fire. It's not about generating profit on the event. It's about creating an amazing experience for our community and our portfolio companies. So we can be a little bit more accommodating with sponsorship packages and what we can provide to people. And at the same time, hold people at arm's length and say, no, I'm not going to bend over to everything you need, because that's going to compromise the experience of our attendees. That's not something we want to do. So you've got to really, really strike that fine balance. It's not easy, but once you find that formula, it becomes far, far more seamless.
Yeah. What was the first event that you hosted, and what was the biggest surprise when you went through that process?
In my whole career, or
in your whole career?
Okay, so the first event I ever did, right, in my entire career that I was part of the hosting team was when I was still living in London. I was working for an event company that actually ran events for the transportation industry, more specifically trains and underground metros. Okay. And the first event I ever did was in Rome. The travel to Rome. We held this event there. It was all around like train signaling and telecommunications and all this kind of stuff. And what amazed me, because I'd never really been exposed to that industry before, it was just the fact that this industry existed. And we had like 200 people from different countries coming to this 3-day event in Rome that we had put together with this team. It blew my mind. Absolutely blew my mind, right? The next experience from that was actually kind of more to gear towards sponsorship. So what the company I work for did very strategically, which is something I adopted as I kind of went off into the event world myself, they formed an advisory board. And this is a really, really good tactic for a lot of event companies to use, providing again they do it with the right kind of ideas in mind. But they built an advisory board, and they brought their advisory board in to London for a day meeting. And during that meeting, we went around the table. What we had at the table were people who would represent the individuals we would invite to attend the event, right, as delegates. And we had people at the table that represented the type of companies that we would approach for sponsorship opportunities. We had a room of like 20 individuals, and we went around the room. We just spoke about various topics related to the subject and got people to just kind of have this roundtable conversation. Okay. And what it did, it was so powerful. It just amazed me. Within a day, we had an entire agenda built from one day's work. All right. And we knew that those topics were going to be really pertinent to the people we were going to be inviting. Within a week, we had 4 sponsors signed up, because those people in that room who represented the vendors, who were part of that kind of planning committee, they left the meeting and were like, we need to be at that event. So then we were able to generate enough sponsorship in the early stages, which kind of formed the snowball for us to kind of continue building from. I saw that happen, and I was kind of amazed by it. And I was like, this is genius, absolute genius. So when I moved to the US, I kind of implemented a similar model with the company I was working for. And then when I started my own event business, I did the same thing. Terrifying, but rewarding at the same time. And so moving forward now, there's very much the kind of process I take is talk to the people that are going to be at your event, get an understanding from them as to what exactly they're looking for, and then start working from there instead of thinking you already know what they want, or worst case scenario, which I see so many event companies doing, makes me sick, just copying content from other events. It's so lazy, and you can tell the event companies that do it just by kind of browsing their agenda. There's no real thought put into it. It's just, you know, buzzword. But just talk to the audience, like talk to your community, and they will tell you what they want, and then you just need to put it into practice.
Yeah, amazing. And I'm aware that we're running out of time here, Jason. So just wanted to run through the final question. This is a question that we ask every single person who comes on to the Hubscale podcast. 21-year-old Jason coming out of Cardiff University. What advice would you give him?
Good research. What advice would I give 21-year-old Jason? I think it would have been actually to try more in my 20s, experiment a lot more, like with different career paths, different things, like really, I think it's a natural, especially for Brits. I don't know about you, right? But there's this natural kind of like mindset that people have as, okay, I leave university, I'm going to get a job. And then a lot of people find themselves 10 years later in the same job, same company. And they're like, this was supposed to be something that just funded my nights out on the weekend. And now all of a sudden I'm in this position where I'm like, well, I don't want to start from the beginning again because I'll go back down the ladder and all this kind of stuff, right? I think in your 20s, that's when you can take risks, loads of risks. Your life doesn't begin until, you're way past your 20s. And people to experiment with passion, their side projects, all this kind of stuff, right? If you're passionate about football, like just start doing a podcast about football, right? Just writing about it, write a blog or whatever, see where it goes. Like, don't have to worry about monetizing it. The challenge with trying to do something like that once you reach your mid-30s is now you've got to worry about monetizing it from day one, because all of a sudden you've got bills to pay, you've got a mortgage or whatever, you might have a family. So you're, unable to take as many risks. So that would be it for me. I wish I kind of pursued my passions. I'm very fortunate that throughout my career, a lot of the time I've done stuff I didn't really want to do. And you wake up in the morning on a Monday, like I wouldn't have made this choice for 21-year-old Jason. But you start then learning, for those people who don't, they're a little bit more risk averse and they don't want to do it. You start learning how you can take your natural skill sets into the job that you already do, right? This is what kind of brought me into this event world and more importantly to communities. What I enjoy doing and what I feel that I am good at is just building relationships with people, talking, having a conversation with one another. And so I can utilize that skill set. I can bring that into this world where it's going to benefit those individuals I'm talking to and the companies I'm working for, whether it be myself or, Merlin Ventures. And so you kind of start identifying where you can find success and interest and excitement through a job that you didn't really necessarily see yourself doing, just by adding your skill set to it that you feel, the best representation of you as a person and your identity.
Amazing. Well, Jason, really enjoyed the conversation today. Super excited to see what happens with Merlin over the next couple of years, and likewise with the community field as well. Who knows what's going to happen? Jason, thank you so much for coming on. Been a pleasure, and look forward to seeing you around.
Again, pleasure is all mine. Really appreciate you indulging me for a bit of time and listening to me waffle on. But big fan of what you guys are doing. Really big fan. I think you guys are doing an amazing job, not just with putting this content out there, but also just Hubscale as a whole. Really, really good, much needed, and continued success to you.
Thank you. Speak soon.